We are recording this on Tuesday night. Today is the 17th day of June, 2025, and we're finishing day 5 of the war. As you know, the war between Israel and Iran. The objective of this war, as far as I understand it, is to eliminate the Iranian nuclear project, also its ballistic missile project, its proxy projects, all these terrible projects. They've been funding and arming terrorists to go after Israel, and we're now in the middle of it. It's been 5 days or so, and by the time this is posted, some of what we talk about may be obsolete. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about the war and some of the thoughts that I had. Of course, our people have been at war since October 7th, and you can make an argument that the Middle East has been completely changed and altered over the course of this long and painful war. You think about the situation before the war. We had Hamas, who's been the ruler of Gaza for 20 years, and they had genocidal, still have, violent ambitions, slaughter, rape, behead, terrorize. And there was an even bigger threat north of the border, Hezbollah, with their more than 100,000 rockets pointed at Israel. And there was an even bigger threat that was the Islamic Republic of Iran, whose motto, even though they're 1,000 miles away, their motto is death to Israel. And they invested billions of dollars in trying to achieve that goal. The terrible, evil goal of eliminating the Jewish state. And they spent an enormous amount of their budget to arm and finance these militias, an enormous amount of effort and capital and resources and treasure on this nuclear project to create a bomb that can be used against Israel or maybe someone else. And even if it's not used directly, it would provide a nuclear umbrella that would prevent any serious attacks on Iran and will ensure the continuity of this regime. And as of right now, we're 5 days into this war. With the help of the Almighty, it seems like the war is doing really well. From what I understand, and again, during the fog of war, you don't know what's true, what's fiction, and what's, propaganda. But it seems like this was a amazing success. This surprise attack that is even greater than the 6-day war surprise attack on Egypt and Syria. An even bigger strike than the beeper attack that kneecapped Hezbollah. In one night, the Israelis took out whatever was left of the Iranian air defenses, and they assassinated the military brass and chain of command and destroyed many of the missiles and the launchers and damaged and or destroyed many of the nuclear installations, assassinated many of the top nuclear scientists. And what we're told, and again, we don't know how much is true and how much is fiction, we're told is that the Israeli Air Force is operating freely over Iran, and they can maintain a presence there unimpeded as long as they wish. Now, of course, all this came at a heavy price. The Iranians, as we know, have been firing ballistic missiles each night at Israeli population centers. They're not even pretending to go after the military. They're targeting civilians. As far as I understand, there hasn't been a single military casualty from these assaults, only civilians. And it's a very serious time. The country's basically frozen. I have 4 siblings that live in Israel, and everyone has to stay close to their secure bunkers. And the newer houses have them built in, like one of the rooms is a mamad, is a secure room. But otherwise, it's 3 a.m. You got to go down the whole apartment. It's got to go down to the bomb shelter in their pajamas. And my oldest brother, he's in the United States. He flew in for a week, and he has a flight back home this week. The airport is closed, and the flight's been canceled, and we still don't know what else the Iranians will do. What other missiles they may have had? Do they have some other higher level missiles? Will they target, God forbid, the Dimona nuclear site in Israel? I was always worried that maybe they already have a nuke or maybe a dirty bomb that they could attach to a ballistic missile. We don't know. But as far as we can tell, and the information that is coming our way, it seems like it's been a smashing success, a success that exceeded even the most optimistic of forecasts. And we hope and pray that the good news continues and that this terrible menace that has been threatening the Jewish state for decades, we hope that they're humbled and they're destroyed, and that peace and stability and safety will come to the land. We hope for a time when our people and our rightful claim to the land is unchallenged. And I know there's been a lot of debate today, anyone who's been following the news today, what to do. Should the Americans join the war? There's one site, apparently, one nuclear installation that's buried deep in a mountain. It's inaccessible to Israeli munitions. You need the special bunker busters, not the small ones, the big ones. And apparently, even though the Israelis went after this site for dough, we're all now experts, of course. From what I understand, there's still plenty of uranium that you could enrich enough to make many, many nuclear bombs. And the Israelis don't have the ability to bomb it. You need the special B-2, B-52 bombers, and some of those special munitions that were actually made specifically for this purpose. And as you know, the president is considering whether to do it or maybe sell some of the equipment to Israel, the equipment, the planes, the delivery mechanisms, the bombs. You know, America is the largest arms provider to Israel. Why can't America sell these weapons as well? Or better yet, allow them to borrow it for an afternoon. Yes, we don't want to get bogged down with a quote-unquote foreign war, an endless war, a forever war in the Middle East. This is not Iraq. No one's arguing to put boots on the ground, to attack it with tanks. Oh, and I remember the Iraq War, and there was this intelligence that Saddam is producing weapons of mass destruction. It turned out that intelligence was false. But from what I understand, everyone agrees, Israel's friends and its enemies, that the only purpose of the Iranian enrichment, to this degree, it's only for military purposes. The amount of enrichment needed for civilian nuclear project is much less than what they've been doing. So there's no peaceful justification for what they're doing. Iraq had no WMDs. Iran is actively maintaining a nuclear weapons project. This is nuts. These are people that, again, they're chanting the official doctrine of the state is death to America, death to Israel. No boots on the ground. We have munitions, from what I understand, that were created specifically for this project. Israel did a lot of the heavy lifting and the dirty work, a couple of bombs, to make this problem go away. I think it's a good idea. You know, America has a long tradition of providing arms, military assistance to our allies, to our friends. World War II, of course, we know, and America's been providing equipment and weaponry to Israel for a long time. It's a reliable ally. We have a threat here that is not only a threat to Israel, but to the region, maybe even to the whole world. And I'm just sorry. If your national chant is death to America, death to Israel, and you explicitly claim that your desire is to eliminate Israel, you have no right to nuclear weapons. It's just not tolerable. I think anyone that can help the Israelis in any way are very much encouraged to do that. And if it means lending out the B-52s or even the B-2s for a half hour, whatever it needs, well, that's a good idea, in my opinion. One last thing before we start. You know, astute followers of Israeli politics know that just last week it was a very different environment in Israel. There was a very heated and contentious debate and dispute in Israel on a totally different subject. It's amazing. Within 1 week, the whole narrative changed. Beginning of last week, all Israel was talking about is the subject of conscription of the yeshiva students. and whether there should be some law that exempts them, or what's the quota of soldiers from this segment of the population. And this got very heated, and it actually threatened to destabilize the government, maybe even trigger new elections. And that was resolved on Wednesday, and this war was launched on Thursday. And I know it's a very controversial subject, but I want to just mention that I'm very heartened that the question of the yeshiva students has been resolved before this war. There were many voices in Israel that were clamoring for legislation that would have effectively criminalized the yeshiva students studying Torah. They would be labeled as deserters. And we know that the Torah protects us. The Torah saves us. And in this very pivotal, very consequential war, this is the first Israeli war against another state since 1973. We've had a lot of wars against militias and terrorist groups. This is the first one against a state. And I'm happy that this did not begin with the subject of the yeshiva students still up in the air. Those who are studying Torah with diligence, with passion, and with zest, they are spiritual soldiers. And their merit, of course, we cannot directly trace their merit to success in the battlefield, but we know that our people always wage a spiritual war alongside every physical conflict. And therefore, I think it's very important that that was resolved. And if we have seen some miraculous outcomes in this war, we're not surprised. As we say in this is Parsha, when we have the Almighty on our side, we'll carve them up like bread. Let us all hope and pray that we continue hearing only good news, and that the enemies of our people are vanquished. And of course, the hostages come home, and the peace and stability flourish again in the land. It's Parshas Shelach. It's an incredibly action-packed Parsha. In our Parsha, the nation was condemned to spend 40 years in the wilderness. When the Parsha began, the nation is under the impression that the entrance to the land is imminent. We had Sinai, we got the Torah, we built the tabernacle, we inaugurated the tabernacle, the Levites are appointed, the priests, the Kohanim are appointed, the nation has been assigned their encampments and the flags and everything with regards to the decampment, the traveling protocol is all in place. It's time to enter Canaan. And Moshe makes a critical decision. Moshe sends 12 ostensibly pious and righteous men on a recon mission. Go scout the land and report back on what you find. What kind of fortifications do they have? How big and strong is the population? Where do they live? What kind of defenses do they have? And bring back some fruit samples of this land. Now, who is responsible for this decision? So the opening verse of the Parsha, Shlach lecha, send for you people, let them go scout out the land. Rashi tells us, what does it mean, that extra word, Shlach lecha? The verse could have said, send spies, send scouts. That's not what it says. It says, send for you scouts, send for you spies. So Rashi says that God said to Moshe, this is your decision. I'm not commanding you. Send if you want. It's up to you. Now, why indeed did Moshe send the scouts? So Rashi explains. If you look at Devarim chapter 1, we see more of the backstory of what happened. Moshe tells the nation that all of the people congregated against Moshe, and they asked to send scouts. So the people asked Moshe, and Moshe asked God, and God says, you could do it, but it's not a good idea. I said the land is good, you can rely on me. And this decision that the people made to second guess God, that created the opportunity for errors and for blunders. So the spies go examine the land for 40 days, and they return with a devastating report. Yes, it's true, the land is flowing with milk and honey. but its people are fearsome. Its defenses are impregnable. We just simply cannot conquer it. The people are strong and the fruits are cartoonishly large. The land consumes its inhabitants. We cannot conquer it. Our best bet is to return to Egypt. Now, two of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, they argued that, well, we have God on our side. And we could carve up the Canaanites like bread. But unfortunately, the nation, they accept the story of the other 10, and they sob needlessly the whole night. That night, Sages tell us, it's the 9th day of the month of Av. And because the nation cried needlessly on that night, God said, I will give you a just cause to cry. God is incensed with the nation's lack of faith, and he threatens to eradicate the nation. We'll start over from scratch with Moshe as the sole progenitor of the new Jewish nation. Moshe, he intercedes and he prays on the nation's behalf. And the Almighty agrees he won't destroy the nation, but there's a punishment. In punishment for the spies' 40-day journey throughout the land, the nation is condemned to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, the entire adult population will die out in the wilderness, and only their descendants will enter the land. Now, following the ill-fated reconnaissance mission and its consequences, there was a cadre, a cohort of Jews who wanted to repent, and they felt bad that they said, we want to go back to Egypt. They said, no, we're going to go to Israel, notwithstanding the fact that the Almighty said no, and they defiantly marched into the land, but they were slaughtered by the nation of Amalek. Now, the Parsha ends with a curious string of laws and narratives. We read about the requirement to bring meal offerings and wine libations to accompany that with sacrifices when the nation enters the land. We have the mitzvah of separating challah, the challah dough, to the kohen. We have the protocol of accidentally worshiping idols. We have the episode of the twig gatherer. A person's gathering twigs on Shabbos, and he is executed for that violation. And the Parsha ends with the 3rd paragraph of the Shema, the instruction to place tzitzis strings, the fringes, with the special blue tcheles wool string, wrap that on the corner of our garments. The general takeaway of the Parsha is that the decision to send the spies was a disaster. This decision condemned the nation to suffer terrible consequences. And it's interesting that the decision itself and all 12 participants in this mission, they would have all gone to that very terrible dark place. The Torah recounts for us the prophylactic measures taken by Joshua and Caleb. Joshua was renamed. He was called Hoshea. He's renamed Yehoshua. That's a form of prayer that God spare him from the sin of the spies. And Caleb went to Hebron. He prostrated himself upon the graves of the forefathers. He was praying to avoid the fate of the spies. It's interesting. Just joining this expedition, absent the intervention that Joshua and Caleb did, everyone would have succumbed. To go and inspect the land that God told you is good, it's a terrible decision. And it would have been way better to just rely on God blindly. With total reliance on God, walk in without knowing anything about the land. Now, what's really interesting, the nation indeed spent 40 years in the wilderness. At the end of 40 years, Moshe passes. Moshe passes, and Joshua succeeds him. And one of Joshua's first acts as leader is to send in spies. And actually, as we know, every week on Shabbos we read the Parsha in the Torah, And we also read a section of the prophets for the Haftorah. And the section that we read this week is Joshua chapter 2, which is the story of Joshua's spies. After Moshe passes, Joshua takes over, and he commissions spies go scout out the land. And they visit a woman named Rachav. She's a harlot, and her home abuts the city walls. And that's a good place to get some information about the land. So the two spies, they go to gauge the public sentiment. And the king of Jericho, he finds out about this, and he's going to look for these spies. And he comes to Rachav, where are these spies? And she says, well, they were here, but they left. They crossed back over the Jordan. Go quickly, go hunt them down. Now, in truth, they were there with her. She had hidden them under a pile of flax in her loft. She saved them. And after the soldiers, they went on a futile chase of the spies, she goes over to them and tells them, I know that you're going to sweep through the land. I want you to spare me and my family. And they said, okay. Keep everyone in your apartment, put the red string on the window. Everyone who's in this house will be spared. She lowers them by rope to the other side of the city, and they scamper back to Joshua. And it's really interesting. We read our Parsha, and it's a terrible decision that was made. We can't blame Moshe, but the decision that was made is terrible because it led to this debacle, and Joshua apparently repeats it. So I want to just share with you an idea that I saw in the Malbim commentary to Joshua chapter 2, verse 1. This is how we begin the Haftorah. It says that in Joshua son of Nun, he sent from Shittim, which is the place that they were located, 2 men to go scout out, to spy out the land. And he did it quietly. There was no fanfare in this mission. And he tells them, go inspect the land, go inspect Jericho. And they went, and the whole story where they met Rachav and so on. So the Malbim has a magnificent piece on this verse. And it says, if you read this verse, you'll find 5 differences between the first time where Moshe sent the scouts, the spies, and the second time when Joshua did it. For one, Moshe sent the spies because the nation asked for it. Again, as I mentioned earlier, chapter 1, verse 22 of Devarim. The nation came to Moshe, let us send people to inspect the land. Here, this was Joshua's decision. The initiator is different. Moshe sent them from very far away, from the wilderness of Paran. That was very far from the land. Joshua sent them from Shittim, which is right on the border. There was no doubt that the entrance to the land would be feasible. And then he explains, Moshe sent 12. Joshua sent only 2. Also, the verb for what Moshe sent, or even the noun, Moshe sent them lasur, which means to explore, to examine. Whereas, they're called meraglim, which means spies, but they're not actually called like that in the Torah. Joshua, he appoints 2 meraglim, which means spies. And he tells us there's 12, one from every tribe. Why is it important to have a representative from every tribe? Shouldn't you just find competent, capable people for the job? Why does every tribe have to be represented? So why does Joshua send 2? Moshe sends 12. So what he explains is that the verb lasuras and esa'aretz, which means to go inspect or scout out the land, that's different than the verb of meraglim, l'ragel, which means to spy. Moshe sent scouts to find the good in the land. Joshua sent spies to find the vulnerabilities and the best avenue of attack of the land. Moshe needed a representative for every tribe, because some tribes will say, no, I don't trust the judgment of the competing tribal representative. They need a place with good ports, and we need a place with good agriculture. We need a place with good pasture, because we have a lot of sheep. So when you want to find out the qualities of the land, well, then you have to have a representative that takes your agenda and your interest to heart. And that's why Moshe sent 12 scouts, Joshua sent 2 spies. And because they're not looking for the positive of the land, there's no room for the land to be slandered. It's just simply where is the best way to attack. The fourth difference, Joshua sent them surreptitiously with no fanfare or publicity. And finally, Joshua sent them specifically to go scout out the city of Jericho, the first place that would be immediately targeted, and that is a much smaller scope of a mandate. So that's interesting. We have the story of the spies that Moshe sent, and the story of the spies that Joshua sent. Now, it's a very interesting point of contrast. We have these spies, the scouts that Moshe sent, and these are people of the highest integrity and renowned for the righteousness, people of the highest order. The most refined members of the people of the nation are included in this excursion. The commentaries tell us that if you look at the 12 names that are listed, they're listed in order of righteousness. And number 5 on the list is Joshua. So there were 4 people who were even more righteous, more spiritually elevated than Joshua. And after a 40-day excursion, they badmouth the land of Israel. The people are so big and so strong and so mighty, there's just no way that we can be successful. And even God can't help us. Let's go back to Egypt. And this sparks a riot, a revolt against Moshe. This is a horrific repudiation of faith. If you have the Mahdi on your side, of course you can vanquish the enemy. You could carve them up like bread. These very righteous people make a terrible mistake, and that causes that the nation has spent 40 years in the wilderness, a year for every day of this excursion. So we have spies who are righteous, who are scholars, who are men of the highest regard in the most elevated of all generations. And they were given a test, a moral test, a spiritual test. They encountered a land and a people that they determined to be unconquerable. The enemy is mighty, is invincible. There's just no way that we could win, that we could be successful. And unfortunately, they failed their test because they forgot about God to some degree. And they convinced the nation, we cannot do it. These 12 people, they began as righteous, as God-fearing people, and with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, who took prophylactic measures, all the spies went down in infamy. Who are these people? Eyewitnesses to the Exodus, to the 10 plagues, to the splitting of the sea, to the revelation at Sinai. People have been eating manna for more than a year, who witnessed the tabernacle. And they gave it a test, and they flunked it. And they died a horrific death. And they condemned the nation to 40 years in the wilderness. And we have a very similar test given to Rachav the harlot, the prostitute. And as they just tell us some of the exploits of this woman, she's very moralistically challenged. When you read what the sages say about her, you conclude she is not exactly a portrait of piety. Yet how does she react to the same dilemma that these 10 righteous spies had? She offers refuge to Joshua's spies. She endangers herself. If the king discovers that she's harboring the enemy, she would certainly be killed. Why? Because she's so convinced of the invincibility of the nation and of God. And why? She says it herself. Because she heard all about the miracles, the splitting of the sea, the war against Sichon and Og. What those 10 pious spies witnessed with their own eyes, she heard about. And she was so convinced that this nation has God on their side, and they would trounce the Canaanites. She says it. I know that the Almighty took you out of Egypt and did so many wonderful miracles for you, and I know that you will be successful in conquering Canaan. And she says, well, do me a favor, spare my family, put the stream by your window. And indeed, chapter 6 of Joshua, they attacked Jericho, and it was declared everything in the city is consecrated for God. Everything must be captured and plundered. Rachav, with her whole family, were spared. She actually has a fascinating epilogue. She converted. According to our sages, she married Joshua. The Talmud tells us that of her descendants, 8 of them were prophets, including the prophet Jeremiah. What a contrast. 10 righteous spies, righteous, towering people who towered above the most righteous of generations. And they witnessed all the miracles of the Exodus. And when they see the Canaanite juggernaut, we can't do it. And Rachav, a woman of shameful moral turpitude, who only heard about those miracles, as she testifies. This is chapter 2, verse 10 of the book of Joshua. Shamanu, we heard that God dried up the waters for the splitting of the sea. We heard about what happened to Sichon and Og. And when we heard about it, we know that we're gonna melt before you. She knew that the Almighty is invincible because the miracles that she heard, and 10 pious men, 10 leaders of the nation who witnessed firsthand those said miracles, they just couldn't wrap their head around the fact the Almighty is really in total control. Rachav has this immense fear of heaven, a tangible understanding about the power of God, and she endangers herself and commits herself to God. And the 10 righteous sages, they just couldn't match her. And we read both of these stories this week, one in the Torah, one in the Haftarah. How is it possible that 10 pious men, learned men, sagacious men who witnessed all these miracles, they failed so miserably in the same test and dilemma that this woman of ill repute was so successful? These are the best and the brightest of our people. Men of leadership and responsibility who personally witnessed the vanquishing of Pharaoh, the vanquishing of the mighty Egyptians, the revelation at Sinai. And they repudiated the power, the dominion of God, whereas Rachav, the prostitute, she sees right through it. She recognizes that God has the power, even though she only heard about those miracles. I think that this is the explanation, and it's maybe a simple explanation, but one with very powerful lessons for us. Our sages tell us in the Talmud, Haba letaher, someone who seeks purity will be aided from above. Someone who seeks impurity will have that availed to them from above. Heaven will help those who want purity. Heaven will pave the way for those who want the unfortunate choice of impurity. This is a very powerful insight. The Talmud does not say heaven will aid those who are lofty, those who are righteous, those who are scholarly, those who are elevated, and heaven will open the door for impurity for those who are low. It doesn't mention this the specific place on the totem pole of righteousness, of greatness, of spiritual status at all. If you want to ascend, if you take a step in that trajectory of elevation, then you will be aided. If you're heading upward, if you're seeking purity, you'll be aided from heaven. If you're seeking impurity, no matter how high and lofty you are, if you're on a downward trajectory, the doors will be opened and you will be allowed to fail and fall into that path of impurity. You can be on top of the world. The 10 biggest scholars, pious leaders, Moshe selected the best of the best. But if you're not ascending at that moment, if you're regressing at that moment, if you're not seeking purity, but rather you're seeking impurity at that moment, notwithstanding your grand, lofty level, you can have the paths to impurity opened before you. By contrast, someone who is all the way at the bottom, in the moral pits, someone who's lived a life of sin and decadence and immorality, but they begin to ascend. They choose a different path. They seek purity. They could succeed in the same area where those great people failed. It's not about where you are, it's where you're heading towards. The direction that you embark upon, that determines how you'll be treated from above. When someone wants to improve, they are granted a certain modicum of spiritual energy that can take them to wherever they want to go to. But if someone has a desire, God forbid, they take a step in the direction of becoming impure, of spiritual regression, the doors are open wide for them. We have 10 people, and they started off at their journey, and their decision to embark upon this journey was one of, let's inspect the land. Let's see, let's evaluate the feasibility of this conquest. Let's see how strong those people are. Maybe we maybe we cannot conquer them. Are they conquerable, or maybe they're unvanquishable? Decision itself, the journey itself, was opening up the possibility that maybe they cannot be conquered. Maybe we cannot do it, notwithstanding the fact that God is on our side. The decision to join this expedition, anyone who's participating in this expedition is at risk of falling into a terrible trap with disastrous consequences. And indeed, the only ones who survived had the intervention. Joshua was renamed Yehoshua. Caleb prostrated himself in prayer on the graves of the forefathers in Hebron. And the result of this expedition was that all the adults who witnessed the Exodus died in the wilderness. By contrast, Rachav, no one would say that she was spiritually loftier than any of these 10 rogue spies. I would say maybe there wasn't even a single person amongst the entire nation who she was spiritually loftier than. These 10 are miles, light years ahead of her. But at that particular time, she was on an upward trajectory. She was seeking purity after a life of impurity. And she was able to evaluate the situation more clearly than those 10 giants. The image of Jacob's ladder from the book of Genesis is an apt description of ascent and descent. If someone is in a posture of ascent, the direction, the place where they're going to, the direction that they're heading towards, is more important, as they just tell us. In determining the likelihood of success in a test, that's more important than the precise positioning on that ladder. Those who are ascending are aided. Those who are descending are vulnerable to make the most grievous of sins. She was spiritually sprouting, ascending the ladder. They were descending. They were spiritually wilting. Certainly, they were much, much higher than her. They were considered great people amongst the greatest of all generations. They were in a different stratosphere than she was, but she was ticking up and they were ticking down, and trajectory matters. I think this idea teaches us the power of both positive and negative change. Now, someone's all the way at the bottom, but they decide that they want to improve, and they make a genuine decision, a genuine commitment to seek purity, to try to have a certain measure of growth. They will be granted, endowed with an enormous bounty of spiritual power. Heaven will come to their aid. And that power will give them the ability to overcome whatever obstacle they'll encounter. On the flip side, someone who's perched atop the spiritual world, but makes a small move to slide down the ladder, to seek impurity. And they open up their heart to the possibility, well, maybe God can do it. Let's find out. There's a little bit of doubt as to whether or not God can do something. They are at real risk for a catastrophe. And even Joshua and Caleb would have gone down if not for the preventative measures, the renaming of Joshua, and the prayer of Caleb in Hebron. That's how dangerous a slight move, or participating in a slight move of seeking impurity, is. And I think Rachav's story is heartening. No matter how low a person may feel, it's very unlikely that they are lower than Rachav. The Talmud tells us that she was impure and a woman of ill repute up to that point. She didn't have this turnaround previously. But her story shows us the power of seeking purity. When someone makes this tiny little decision, provided it's real, it's genuine, it's sincere, they want to improve, they want to grow, they want to connect to their roots, they want to connect with their creator, to their heritage, to their Judaism. They want to reinvent their relationship with God. That one decision unlocks tremendous power to be successful in any challenge that they'll face over the course of that journey. May we all be so fortunate as to be included in those who seek purity, to be among those who ascend the ladder. May we all reach great heights. And now it's time for this week's dilemma. It's an interesting one. It's actually a true story. The Parsha ends with the mitzvah of tzitzis. On your four corner garments, you tie strings, fringes. Now there's an important technicality. It's not a mitzvah to wear tzitzis. Rather, in the event that you have a four-corner garment, you must place these fringes on the four corners of your four-cornered garments. So suppose someone is not wearing a four-cornered garment. There's no mitzvah to have tzitzis. You can only put tzitzis on a four-cornered garment, not a five-cornered, not a three-cornered, only a four-cornered garment. Now, in practice, we deliberately wear a four-cornered garment so that we have the ability to wear tzitzis, to attach tzitzis to it. Now, suppose someone wears multiple four-cornered garments. Well, if you're wearing a four-cornered garment, you must have fringes placed upon all of them. And there was a famous rabbi named Rabbi Scheinberg who made a basic calculation. Well, if I wear a garment that has four corners and I put tzitzis on it, it's a mitzvah, right? What if I have two garments that both have four corners? Well, that's two mitzvahs. So if each garment is a mitzvah, why not more than one? Well, why stop at two? Why not 10? Why not 100? And he ended up wearing many, many, many. Well, how many? So I asked ChatGPT, how many pairs of tzitzis did Rabbi Scheinberg wear? This is the quote that it responded with. He reportedly wore at least 150 pairs of tzitzis. Some accounts say closer to 160 pairs of tzitzis. He was a small, diminutive man, but he looked like a fullback, with the old football pads, because it was just massive. And he actually had a special device where he could slip on and slip off from all those pairs of tzitzis. But here's the dilemma. This is a true story. In the aftermath of the Holocaust, there was a story with some survivors. They were in a sanatorium near Munich, and one great rabbi arrived, and he had a set of streams for a tzitzis. But he had only one. And there's hundreds of Jews there who have not fulfilled this mitzvah in years. And when this great rabbi arrived, he said, okay, I have some tzitzis, but I can only give to one person. And everyone wanted it. Everyone was so excited to finally fulfill this mitzvah they haven't fulfilled in a long time. So when he saw that everyone wanted this, the only fair way to do this is with a lottery. Everyone put their name in a bag, pick out one name. That's the person who wins the rights to have the tzitzis. So there's one person, his name was Rabbi Mendel. His last name it's over here, but it's, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. Peshitik? I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but I saw this documented in reliable sources. He was very desirous of having this tzitzis. So he had one shirt, one garment, and he ripped it in a way that it now had four corners. And he goes over to the rabbi and says to him, listen, I have a four-corner garment, and therefore I cannot wear it unless I have a tzitzis. No one else has a four-corner garment, and therefore you have to give it to me, because I have an obligation, and they don't have an obligation to wear the four-corner garment, to wear the tzitzis. So, no, we have to cancel the lottery. We have to cancel the lottery. This is a story that actually happened. And the question is, the dilemma is, what to do. You have one pair of tzitzis, one set of streams. You're going to give it to one person. And there's hundreds of people here. And they all want it. And you already said you're going to have a lottery. But this one Remendel character, he decided to take an aggressive measure. And he ripped his garment. He has only one garment. This is the garment he's going to wear. If I don't give him the tzitzis, he's now going to be in violation of the law, because they'll have a four-corner garment without those fringes on it. So what to do? So I'll tell you what he decided to do. He said, I already made a declaration we're going to have a lottery. But I know for sure, if this person, his desire is to actually fulfill the will of Hashem, I know he'll win the lottery. And guess what happened? There were hundreds of names in the bowl. And indeed, that bold and aggressive and audacious Rav Mendel character who ripped his garment to make it obligated in tzitzis, that was the name that was pulled out of the hat and was the winning ticket to earn those fringes. Now, the story that I read, it tells us that this person, we know who he is. He passed away in the year 5765. That's 20 years ago. And this story is well documented. I thought it was a very beautiful story, very interesting story, and a very interesting dilemma to end off this week's Parsha podcast. It's a busy week. It's an interesting week. It's a fascinating week. It's a week that we hope and pray to hear only good news from our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land and wherever they may be. And we're going to dedicate our studies today on the Parsha podcast to the success of this war against our enemies. May our soldiers succeed, and may the Lord protect the land and its inhabitants, and may we only hear good news from our brethren, wherever they may be, and especially those, of course, in Israel, on the front lines, in the Holy Land. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. Have a terrific, magnificent, sensational Shabbos upcoming. And please God, we'll return next week to more good news, please God, in good health and in good spirits. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.